Welcome friends to another character build for Baldurs Gate 3. This episode, we are creating Dabi from My Hero Academia. Quick side note before I get into all the nitty-gritty details of 12 levels of this character build. This is a build request that I've been meaning to do for a very long time, and I now have all the mods that I need to make it come to life. This is also a build request for my two best friends, Win and Kylie, as they're both My Hero Academia fans and have been some of the most supportive friends that really encourage me to keep creating these videos for all of you to enjoy. Now, this is essentially my way of saying thank you to them, and also something that's really new and refreshing for returning viewers and new potential viewers to get hooked onto as well. That being said, I do want to make this as lore friendly to the character of Dabi as possible, hence the reason why, fair warning, there's going to be spoilers to his backstory and who he really is, and also some of the things that he's done in the TV show. So, you've been warned. Diving into Dabi's first level, he is of course going to be a human, but we're going to really spice things up with him by playing as a modded variant human, which is based off the actual D&D tabletop race. Now, what this mechanic does is it gives us 3 passives to choose from a massive list here, but to make things easy for all of you, and I hope this is somewhat lore friendly, plus also any My Hero Academia fans, let me know in the comments if you think I should make changes to this build. If you disagree or agree, I'm very much open to criticism just because, well, I love talking about the lore and characters of your favorite universes with you. But with the passives here, I'm going to pick up Resilient Intelligence, increase our intelligence by 1, and gain proficiency in intelligence saving throws. Basically, this is going to be very useful in the early game for us, and we'll get into more detail about that once we get to the abilities stats. For the second one, I like choosing Fast Hands. Essentially, this is our way of saying that Dabi has those flashy moves when he's using them for his fire quirks like Flash Fire Fist, but also it does have a very useful mechanic of granting an additional bonus action. I'm also using a mod that converts 2 bonus actions into an action, and I'll definitely be showcasing that in the combat portion of this video as well. Scrolling all the way down, we now have Cold Resistance as our last passive. Now, some of you are probably thinking, why Cold Resistance and not Fire Resistance? This is, yes, a spoiler ahead, Dabi is technically cold resistant on his mother's side, not fire resistant, hence the reason why, well, his fire does unfortunately burn him. We're also making Dabi a wizard for all of those fire-based spells and cantrips, and speaking of which, the cantrips here that you'll be starting off with: Firebolt, 1 to 10 fire damage, Control Flames, which pairs really well with Create Bonfire, 1 to 8 damage. Create Bonfire will be an area of effect attack with Control Flames potentially being able to expand or shrink it, and then Firebolt of course being your direct damage dealer. All pretty basic spells, but very useful for Dabi's starting character. As for the actual spells, Burning Hands for that close range damage with 3 to 18 fire damage, Magic Missile for that overall consistent damage of 6 to 15. Now, here's the thing too, I am also using a mod that gives you different types of magic missiles. So there's frost magic missiles, and of course with Dabi we're going to get the fire magic missile, and I'll have to take a look into the mod as well, but I believe you can change the chromatics or the colors of the spells as well. So with as many cantrips and spells that we'll get, we're going to try to change their colors to the blue tinge or the classic blue fire that Dabi is known for. This is also a bit of a stretch with the spell choice here with Fog Cloud. Basically, you can justify it as the smoke from your flames being used to blind your enemies. False Life, this is also a bit of a stretch here, but Dabi is essentially a zombie. He doesn't really know how to die, and despite him getting burned by his own flames, he's incredibly resilient to it. Well, technically not fire resistant. He just has a very strong willpower, and False Life is a good representation of that. Also, speaking of Dabi's personality, of course we're going to pick up Cause Fear in order to frighten our enemies in combat, and also this is very much a bit of a stretch here, but Frost Fingers, it's technically lore friendly to Dabi's character, 2 to 16 cold damage. Now, the thing with Dabi is even though he does have fire-based quirks from his dad Endeavor, like I was saying before, he inherited ice resistance from his mother's side, and also it's later confirmed in the comics that he does have latent ice quirks or hidden ice abilities. I believe it was a quirk awakening later down in the series, not during the war arc, but about, I want to say, a season or two after that. Anyway, My Hero fans, please let me know if you agree or disagree with me choosing Frost Fingers, but I will stand by that Dabi does have some very latent and very well hidden ice quirks about him. Background for Dabi, of course, is going to be a criminal with skills of deception and stealth, very fitting for the League of Villains member. As for the abilities here, since your spells and casting modifier relies so much on intelligence, Dabi is a pretty smart human in my opinion. So with that resilient passive, we're going to get an even 18 for intelligence instead of the normal 17, overall giving us a +4, very powerful in the early game. Constitution, we're going to make it semi-passable with the 12. Dabi will be very dexterous and being able to dodge decently at 14 dexterity. Wisdom, leave it at base level 10. Dabi's not exactly the wisest, but also he's not completely stupid either. He's also not really the strongest of the League of Villains members. As for charisma, well, I mean, we know all about the fanfics with him and Hawks, so I think Dabi has a little bit of riz to him, so we're going to keep it at 14 and give him a respectable +2 to charisma. Also, let's just admit it, a lot of the fan base really loves Dabi. At least the villain fanboys and fangirls. As for the proficiencies, Dabi's pretty good at dancing, so we're going to give him a +4 to acrobatics checks. Stealth, we're going to give him a pretty respectable +4. Arcana, +6. Investigation, +6. And Deception at a very respectable +4. Also, everyone, before we get into levels 2 through 12, as well as the equipment choice, I am using different appearance and hair mods to get as close as possible to Dabi's look from the anime. I'll be leaving links to those mods in the comments below, as well as the main mods, which are the class mods. I'm just having a whole bunch of fun with the modding community of Baldurs Gate. It's insanely creative with some of the things that these mod authors come up with. Level 2 grants us access to different subclasses of wizards, and at this level we're going to pick up Disciple of the First Flame, which grants us subclass features of Ember's Fate. Any creature that this unit hits with a spell that does fire damage receives burning status for 2 turns, so this is a good damage over time feature. We also gain unique cantrips and spells such as Fangs of the Fire Snake, hit your foe from afar, next melee attack, deal an additional 1 to 4 fire damage, and Fire Fangs of Quilana, strike foes from afar with the Fangs of Quilana, dealing bludgeoning damage and fire damage. At 3rd level, we gain Quellag's Nightmare. Whenever this unit inflicts burning on a creature, it also suffers from being frightened for 1 turn, so this essentially stops your enemies in their tracks and allows you to follow up with additional attacks. And we also gain a unique spell of Great Combustion, 3 to 18 fire damage. This is going to be a close range spell though. Produce a blast of Great Flame, dealing that fire damage to any creature caught within, and it's also somewhat of a crowd control spell too. Level 4 grants us access to a feat, and at this level, I'm going to pick up ability improvement, and thanks to us picking up resilient +1 in intelligence, we can now invest 2 points into intelligence, maxing it out, and giving us a very strong +5 at the early game stage. Level 5 gets really interesting as we multiclass into the Asgorath Chaos Sorcerer, which is another modded subclass that I covered in a separate video. Now, that video alone, I went through all 12 levels as only that subclass alone, just to showcase everything there is that the class has to offer, and also as a personal thank you to the mod author themselves. Now, I will leave a link to that in the pinned comment below. And if you want to check out the more detailed version of that, I do highly recommend it. But for this specific build, let's go into the cantrips and spells for this subclass and multiclass really. For the first one, you're going to pick up Firebolt, which is a modded cantrip. I will admit, some of these are modded as well. So that does 5 to 20 fire damage, hurl a bolt of cinder. Ray of Frost, 5 to 14 damage. These two are specifically from Pathfinder, if I believe, which is pretty much D&D, but its own separate thing. There's videos out there that detail how Pathfinder is essentially just an offshoot of the official D&D edition, but I won't go into too much of a rambling on that. The other one that I would personally pick up for roleplay purposes is Ray of Frost. Hurl a bolt of frost that deals 5 to 14 cold damage on hit, and also reducing the target's movement by 3 meters. Like I said before, these are latent ice abilities that Dabi has in the anime and manga. So if you want to justify using them, go for it. If you really want to just challenge yourself and only have fire-based cantrips, spells, aka quirks for Dabi, then by all means, you can restrict yourself if you want. Frostbite, also for flavor purposes, 2 to 12 cold damage that instead inflicts disadvantage on an enemy's next attack roll instead of reducing movement speed, so it's just pick and choose your poison there. This one, Green Flame Blade, 1d8 fire damage, again, only used for flavor purposes, and if the enemy does close the distance on you, strike a target with a melee weapon, allowing fire to leap from your target to strike a second nearby foe within 2 meters of them, dealing that damage output. Now, is it metagame useful? Probably not, and ideally you don't want to be using this as much, or let alone at all. If you do, well, the enemy definitely got their jump on you. Now, the spell choices here, my personal picks for Dabi would be Chilling Spray. Icy shards fly out from you in a cone, so it's a short-range crowd control damage, dealing 2 to 8 cold damage and reducing their movement speed by 3 meters for 2 turns. And Befuddle, this one is a bit of a stretch, sow seeds of confusion in your target's mind, causing their actions and thoughts to become clumsy. Now, this is a bit of a stretch one because of the fact that, well, it is more of a psychological thing, but at the same time, you could justify it as Dabi having that psychological effect by revealing that, well, he's Endeavor's son, and also the long-lost brother of Shoto Todoroki. But that is my personal justification. If you want to pick up a more offensive spell, by all means, go for it. There's a whole bunch here. But also, with the cantrip, you do get an extra one here as an Asgorath Chaos Sorcerer. I would personally pick up Chroma Darts, which deal 2 to 20 fire damage, but here's the thing too. These are Chroma Darts, so they're different colored spells, and also you could have instead an Ice Chroma Dart if you prefer, which I will showcase in the battle playthrough too. Hurl out a Chroma Dart if it lands a critical hit or kills an entity or you're suffering from its element. You will emit 1 more projectile, maximum of 2 additional projectiles per initial one. Let's also take a look at some of the other features that the Chaos Sorcerer provides, such as chromatic missiles. Again, very similar to the Chroma Darts. It does say it's force damage, but you can definitely change the damage type and of course the color, which, being Dabi, we're going to try to choose anything that's blue. So basically ice, potentially blue fire if possible too. And the subclass features that we get, this one here is going to be a bit of a doozy too. Okay, Seasons of Chaos. Chaos cycles the caster through different chaotic seasons. Whenever a spell is cast, the caster gets a different chaos season. So basically, your fire not only ramps up and evolves, kind of similar to what Dabi's does in the anime, but at the same time, this is where things really just get out of whack, as you'll see in the battle playthrough too. Now, that's the thing too, is with Season of Chaos, these effects can be either really positive or detrimental to you, ideally detrimental to your enemies. But let's move on with the rest of the levels in Chaos Sorcerer. I'm genuinely loving this build, how it's turning out right now, because of the fact that, yeah, you do get the very overpowered and of course flame-based attacks of the Disciple of the First Flame, but just the flavor and overall, I guess, roleplay and high potential that you can get with the Chaos Sorcerer, or like I mentioned before, detriments. At level 6, this is a bit of a stretch for a spell choice, but Fleet Step from Pathfinder gain extra 18 meters of movement speed. We could justify this as saying that Dabi is a pretty fast character, and, well, he's definitely closed the distance on his enemies too, like that one battle with Hawks where he got the jump on him and also surprise attacked him too. So that's going to be a good, useful utility spell. Now, for the passives of meta magic, I would personally pick up Distance Spell. You want to be that long-range caster and outdistance other enemy casters too. Plus, also, you want to essentially try to snipe the enemies before they get the distance on you, or close the distance, I should say. Now, I would also pick up Extended Spell as well, double the duration of conditions, summons, and surfaces caused by spells. I'm picking this one specifically for the burning damage and also the freezing ice effects that you can have as well. Now, go ahead and replace any spell that you wish, but also let's take a look at the spell that you gain here specifically as the Chaos Sorcerer. Chromatic Ray. 6 to 36 fire damage, hurl 3 rays of fire each. Now, even though it does say fire damage, again, I'm going to say that you can choose different colors and also different damage types too. So essentially you can have a lot of variety in terms of damage output, but also it helps you cover your bases too. You can restrict yourself to and say, hey, I'm only going to use fire damage for Dabi or ice damage if you really want to get hard into the roleplay. At level 7, the spell choice that I would pick up here is an interesting one. Flame Wisp is a Pathfinder spell where 3 faintly glowing wisps of fire float around your head. Each time you hit a creature with an attack, one of the wisps goes hurtling towards the other creature, dealing 1 to 4 fire damage and setting your target and the second creature on fire. You regain 1 flame wisp when you cast a spell and do fire damage, so it can be self-sustaining too for you. You essentially get these little summons that you use as essentially secondary attacks, and even though it's just 1 to 4 fire damage, the fact that it will cause burning to your targets is very detrimental in the long run for damage over time to your enemies too. And also, Dabi technically, I guess, doesn't have summons, but hey, this is Dabi in the D&D universe, so you could justify it as such for picking up this spell. Now, the meta magic I would personally pick here would be Subtle Spell. Cast spells while silence. Basically, it's kind of like your, not just anti-magic, but it's the anti-magic, if that makes sense. So if an enemy caster gets a little too cheeky and tries to silence you, you can basically say screw you and cast another spell to kill them off for having the audacity to silence you. It's also a good way to cover your bases too, because hey, you are that long-range caster and you don't want to have a crap ton of your attacks be negated. At level 8 for your cantrip choice, this is a little metagamey, but you could easily justify this as saying that this cantrip is like fire armor piercing damage, if that makes sense. Phase Bolt which is a Pathfinder's spell slash cantrip, 6 to 18 force damage. Shoot a bolt of force to destroy your target's armor, dealing 6 to 18 force damage and reducing the target's AC by 2 for 2 turns. Now, again, like I said, metagaming in the fact that you have a chance to not just make things easier for you to hit, but this is a good setup cantrip in my opinion too. Being able to dish out that damage, but then also for your next follow-up attacks, or which are going to be fire or ice-based spells, being able to bypass their AC potentially. It's a good wombo combo in my opinion. And also for the spell choice here, Final Sacrifice, 6 to 36 damage. Channel your disruptive enemies through the bond between you and your minion, causing it to violently explode. Target is immediately slain, and the explosion deals 6 to 36 fire damage to creatures within 20 feet of it on a failed dexterity saving throw, or half as much on a success. Now, in terms of having a scroll to summon a minion, or learning to summon a minion later down the line, that's definitely up to you what kind of like familiar or like I said, summon you want to just send it as like a kamikaze strike. But that's the thing too, it's definitely something Dabi would do shamelessly. I don't know if shamelessly. How many of you, side question, think that Dabi was actually crying or sad that twice died in the manga and anime? Well, that's the thing too. I'm just wondering if he would. I have a good feeling he would definitely use something like Final Sacrifice to take out his father or his brother. But anyway, that aside, the meta magic choice we get here as a Chaos Sorcerer is Luck Control. Next spell is guaranteed to be a critical hit. Costs 1 Chaos point per spell slot level used. Cantrips also costs 2 Chaos points. Now you could also pick up meta magic controlled chaos if you want. Choose from temporary chaos spells which don't have a backlash when fired. This is good for, like I said, personal control, but also making sure that you don't have any negative effects on you. I personally am leaning towards luck because of the description says, getting that critical hit and also damage output, which is definitely right up Dabi's alley. He wants to do the most damage possible to his enemies with his flames. And also for the feat choice here, I would personally pick durable. When you would take 5 or less damage, you instead take no damage whatsoever, which it's pretty much speaking of Dabi's resiliency. I know he seems to be like a charred chicken in the show, but also being able to get back up and keep fighting and pretty much never die, that's definitely a feat that really speaks to him as a character. At level 9, the spell choice is a very wild one. Blazing Dive, which is, yes, another Pathfinder spell. Superheated air collects under you, buoying you high into the sky before you plummet back down in a fiery comet. You fly 15 feet straight up in the air, then fly in a straight line to an empty space of your choice on the ground within 60 feet. When you land, the blistering air blasts out from under you, dealing 3 to 12 bludgeoning damage and 3 to 18 fire damage to all creatures within 3 meters. And this is a burning effect for 2 turns as well. Now, the damage output is pretty high up there, honestly, and it's definitely a flashy move that Dabi himself would use. In fact, he did use it in the War arc, if I remember right, when he was attempting to do a flash fire fist. But this is perfect both for roleplay and also for optimal battle usage too. Like I was saying too, flashy, right up Dabi's alley, and it's pretty much Dabi's best way of saying it, in my opinion. It's his fuck you spell, essentially. Now, for the subclass features, Chaos Step, try to swap places with a random entity. Well, you can pick and choose. If you really want to go with this and use it for Dabi, go for it. But if you really are just thinking, no, it's not what Dabi would use, then choose not to use it. For the spell choice that, well, it's what you gain here. Chromatic Fireball. It's basically what it sounds like, 8 to 48 fire damage. Choose any element to hurl out a fireball. Upcasting increases its damage output. Now for replacing a spell, you could replace Fleet Step with a Shardalon Stride. This is, in my opinion, just for roleplay purposes. The billowing dragon flames blast from your feet, granting explosive speed that increases movement speed by 6 meters and prevents provoking opportunity attacks. So if you want to float just like Dabi was doing in the war arc against his brother, go ahead and pick up this one. Alright friends, it may seem basic that we're picking up Fireball at 10th level, but specifically this is going to be the Pathfinder version of Fireball. Now, I will outright say it doesn't have as high of a damage potential as the base game Fireball, but here's the thing too. You have a choice of choosing a designated spot for this, so it has more range, more control for you, and also it's got that area of effect potential too. So basically, in a way, this has more range than the base game Fireball. That is my justification for picking it up compared to this type of Fireball. 48 damage, higher of course than 36, but also being able to have that control. And also, speaking of control, you do have a spell that's called Invoke Asgorath's Control. Call upon the mighty Asgorath to stabilize the chaotic energies of your magic for 2 rounds. The unpredictable effects of the chaos seasons are frozen, giving you a brief period of predictability and, yes, control in the midst of magical turmoil. Use this wisely to regain your footing or plan your next move in the ever-shifting landscape of chaotic magic. So you don't have to run the risk of having something bad happen to you, and you pretty much are able to kind of get a grip on yourself, basically. And it's basically what I personally think Dabi needs in order to control his flames. Like it was said in the anime, that Dabi didn't really know how to like cool his flames down, and this is kind of in a way role-playing that sense of Dabi learning to actually tone it down a bit. Alright friends, at level 11 we're switching back to our Disciple of the First Flame for that Chaos Fireball, and yes, pettily speaking, I am picking this up for that increased damage output, just in case those of you really want to maximize your actual potential. With this spell, you shoot a Chaos Flame from your fingers, and it explodes upon contact, exploding everything in the vicinity. Now, it doesn't have the full control of the Pathfinder one, but like I was saying before, this is good for flavor purposes and role-playing too. And also at final level, you can choose either to level back up into Sorcerer, but also for the purposes of this character build, I'm going to pick up another level of Disciple of the First Flame, which grants us Ashen Oath, ignore resistance, and immunity to fire damage too. So this is essentially to all of those enemies that have those resistances, well, screw you, I'm going to damage you anyway. It's a nice little touch for Dabi. Alright friends, when it comes to the equipment choices, admittedly I did a little bit of mixing and matching. Some of these are modded equipment choices to really lean into Dabi's character, and some of them may be a little odd too, because admittedly some of them boost ice attacks instead of fire, but hey, like I was saying before, latent ice abilities, my friends. So this is my personal justification for picking them, but also they do look pretty good and close to Dabi's actual outfit from the anime and manga too. Now, getting into the specific pieces, Inferno Adept Hat. Inferno Advantage grants you advantage on attack rolls against burning creatures, and you gain a +2 bonus to spell save DC and spell attack rolls. You also gain an evocation spell of Wall of Fire there to use. Cloak of Inferno Adept. Infernal Retaliation. Whenever a creature deals damage to the wearer, the creature takes 3 to 12 fire damage and creates a surface of fire beneath you. So this is kind of like you're saying, screw you for attacking me, I'm going to dish back at least some amount of damage to you. You also gain Adroit Caster. Cantrips targeting foes and allies can target an additional creature. Same target can be chosen twice, so essentially a little bit of crowd control there. You also gain, of course, the Fireball evocation spell with this to use without expending a spell slot. Frigid Adept Cloak Robe. Frigid Mastery, when the wearer deals cold damage, it deals an additional 6 cold damage, so just stacking up the damage output. You also gain magical armor. AC of this armor is based on your armor proficiency, dex, and level. If you have medium armor or heavy armor proficiency, +2 extra AC. AC increases at level 4, 7, and 10, so it provides an added survivability, but also I specifically am picking this up for the added spell of Armor of Vorgal. Gain 30 temporary hit points and deal 30 cold damage to any creature that hits you with a melee attack. So this will stack up with the Cloak of Inferno Adept. So not only are you dishing out fire damage, but with this armor spell, you dish out cold damage as well back to your enemies. And this also provides those temporary hit points, which will give you just a little bit of extra. Again, I'm going to use the word survivability, and will just buys you time in combat. For the glove piece here, I personally like Spellmite gloves. When casting a spell that requires an attack roll, you can take a -5 penalty to the roll of being able to hit your opponent, but if you do actually hit your opponent, you deal an additional 1d8 damage. This is a nice little risk and reward thing to have, just because I'm the type of person that really likes to stack the odds and damage output, even if it means I may miss that attack. And it's definitely something that I could see Dabi using as well. For the foot piece here, Frigid Adept Boots, Frigid Acuity. Whenever you deal cold damage, gain Frigid Acuity for 2 turns, and Frigid Acuity is described as affected entity has a +1 bonus to your attack rolls and spell difficulty class per turn remaining. Now I also specifically picked this up for Icy Step, just for flashy purposes. Teleport to an area and deal 3 to 12 cold damage where you land. Impact Blast spreads in a 3-meter zone, so it's a good way to literally make an entrance. As for your jewel pieces here, Spellcrux Amulet, basically what it says, it restores a spell slot of your choice. Ring of Fire, when dealing fire damage, the wearer deals an additional 1 fire damage, and yes, a very minor effect there, but also leaning into the roleplay as well. Ring of Self-Immolation, this is a little bit of a risk and reward thing, but it's really something that Dabi would shamelessly do. Basically, light yourself on fire to gain heat, and also by gaining heat, you do dish out an additional 1 to 4 fire damage each turn with heat convergence. And my bad, I should have rephrased that. You take 1 to 4 fire damage, but by gaining heat convergence, you consume your heat to fuel a powerful attacks. The next time you deal fire damage, deal an additional 1 fire damage for every turn of heat remaining. So another risk and reward mechanic if you want to really just get your enemy down to their last few hit points at the risk of potentially harming and destroying yourself. It's, yeah, Dabi is a bit of an edgelord there, but also Inferno Adept Staff, which is going to be your main quote-unquote weapon piece. Inferno Heat Buildup. When creatures are hit with fire damage while already burning, the target needs to succeed a Constitution saving throw or become ignited for 2 turns, gaining 1 to 6 more damage, fire damage to themselves too. We also gain a +1 bonus to spell save DC and spell attack rolls. Arcane Battery, which allows us to restore another spell slot of our choosing. This is really good for stacking with the Spellcrux Amulet. Magical Fire Weapon. Magical Fire Weapon grows more powerful as its wielder gains experience. Stats increase at levels 3, 5, and 7. Hopefully you won't need to use this. This is a melee-based attack as well. Inferno Ray is also an added spell from the staff. 2 to 12 fire damage which will ignore resistance too. And we do have a kind of low AC at 14, but hey, it's better than nothing, honestly. Alright friends, that has been my character build and showcase of Dabi for Baldur's Gate 3. As always, let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with my leveling choices or equipment choices. Do let me know too if you would choose things for roleplay purposes, or if you think that specifically they would fit Dabi's character better, or maybe even provide better damage output, effects, and such. And also, please let me know your honest feedback in the comments if you like these types of character builds. I know they can be a little far-fetched and also very out of left field with these Warhammer characters that I have based my previous builds on, and pretty soon to be My Hero Academia characters. Also, regardless if you're a returning viewer or a brand new viewer, thank you so much for watching this far into the video. If you are one of those new viewers, I would love to have you join us on more adventures like these, which could be character builds in Baldur's Gate 3, and potentially even Dragon's Dogma and modded Skyrim, which I do plan to upload those types of videos to my channel, just to spice things up and provide more variety too. And also, speaking of variety, I do also upload Warhammer campaigns. These are narrative-driven campaigns and also heavily edited to show and tell unique stories of the different legendary lords, and some of those legendary lords, whether they're modded or base game legendary lords, I make character builds for them as well. So if you do love those kinds of things, I'd love to have you consider hitting those like, subscribe, and bell icon notifications, and I'll save you a seat at the table for those next adventures. Also, a little grubby love letter and thank you to my best friends Win and Kylie, who I dedicated this video for. Thank you both for being some of the most supportive friends, and genuinely speaking, the most understanding too. It's definitely a very difficult journey as a YouTuber, and making these kinds of videos is what's really driving me, and just as long as they make both of you very happy, and of course whoever else is watching this video too. Genuinely speaking, I love making these out of whack, zany videos for both of you to enjoy, and also for some members of the audience to enjoy as well, no matter how crazy or, yes, very unlore friendly and game breaking they may be. And I do hope to make more of these to make both of your days better, and also anyone else to bring joy to your life, whether it's just listening to these character builds or also finding new mods for you to enjoy too. Until then, I'll see you all next time. Take care and farewell, friends.